raised as a simple country girl just above the South Carolina border. The town was one of those itty-bitty old things where you could see straight through it, and absolutely everybody knew everything about you. I guess I had a normal childhood. I grew up on my father's plantation with four older brothers. The thing was, I hated normal. With four older brothers, I was always a tomboy, and my best friend was a boy named Thomas Halls who lived down a dusty dirt road not far from my house. My mother, being a prim and proper Southern old lady, wanted me to be just that, prim and proper. Much to my mother's dismay, I often came home covered in mud, bruised up, and smelling like a pig. See, Mama didn't like me being rough and hanging out with the boys. She wanted me all dressed up in a frilly Sunday dress and a bonnet. After church, I used to sneak out, change into my brother's overalls, and go fishing by Old Mill's Pond with Thomas. That was me, running free with the boys, not a care in the world. Growing up as a tomboy, I had never had much interest in girly things, like tea parties, dolls, and I never saw boys as more than friends. But in high school, everything changed. I started courting my best friend Thomas, never losing my boyish tendencies, of course. He proposed to me while we were boating at the familiar Mills Pond, and at 19, on May 7th, 1859, we had a small country wedding. We slowly, with my father's help of course, started our own farm. He even gave us a few slaves to help us out. The year was 1860. Problems were arising in the nation. States were seceding from the Union. Our right to own slaves was being threatened. I wanted to do something about it, but what could a woman do? The first battle at Fort Sumter started the war. Though there was little bloodshed, it still gave me the will and the thirst to do something about this war. I knew what I would do. It was crazy. It was life-threatening. My husband would certainly oppose the idea, and as a girl, it was illegal. But I needed to do it. I would do it. On June 19th, 1861, I left home, saying I was going into town, and I jumped on our horse with a biscuit and some scissors and headed to Raleigh. I was going to become a soldier. It was a hard decision, but I knew I made the right one. I cut off all my hair and changed my name to Willard Tram. Then I registered as a Confederate soldier. I was immediately sent to Fort Fisher by the coast, no questions asked. Life as a soldier was definitely not what I was expecting. I was paid just $11 a month. I had thought I would be prepared because of my brothers roughing me up, but I didn't have the strength or the stamina to be a soldier. I had to work twice as hard as the men. I had only shot a gun a few times, and with poor aim, I might add. I also wasn't prepared to march for miles while carrying a Springfield rifle. I wrote a letter to my husband about a week after I left. I'm sure he was worried all out of his wits. I knew my letter wouldn't suppress his worries much, but he needed to know the truth. I told him I loved him and that I would return to him as soon as the flames of war were extinguished, knowing that there was a good chance that I might not survive. At the camp, I made great friends and bonded with the soldiers. We all wanted our right to be our own nation with slavery. And as the weeks wore on, I'd roughed up. What little bit of fat I had was transformed into pure muscle. I was pretty good with the gun, and I was ready to fight. The first battle I fought at was the battle at Bull Run. It was a long and restless march for miles under that scorching July sun, and when I reached the top of the hill, all I could see was a wall of Union soldiers to the north, and all I could do was wait. Wait to die, wait to live. Left, right, left, right. The closer I got, the prouder I was of my decision to fight for my rights. When we met our troops, there was only silence. Two walls of soldiers with the will to kill. The first gun was fired and I raced into full-on battle. It was absolutely crazy trying to dodge bullets while shooting other people without a second thought. The fight raged on. The people were everywhere, and all I could do was shoot. I was exhausted, but at least I was alive. When I felt as if I would fall over and die, the second round of troops came as our salvation. In the end, it was another Confederate victory. Life went on like this for months, even years. The tragedy of the bloodiest war in history hardened my heart. Every day I would lose friends in battle, and even more from the diseases that were rampant in the camps. I came close to death myself when I caught an awful case of typhoid fever. I killed people every day. I took the lives of other soldiers' friends. Women would be left without husbands, and soon I didn't even care. I lost touch with my husband and rarely thought about him, but the Confederates hadn't lost a battle yet, so I presumed that I would soon return back to that small North Carolina town that now seemed so distant. On July 2nd, 1863, I marched into the town of Gettysburg up in Pennsylvania. It was the second day of fighting, and I came to reinforce the Confederate troops. When I got there, my group was sent straight to Cemetery Hill, where we fought at a disadvantage. We fought for hours. I got a severe wound in my lower arm, but I continued to fight. The Union had the high ground, but the Confederacy prevailed. After the battle, my arm was patched up, and I had no intent on fighting the next day. But they needed me, so I followed Colonel's order and got dressed for battle. July 3rd, 1863. I was a part of Pickett's charge. We marched to our site and waited for our cue to fight, poised for battle. On our cue, the men charged forward into a bloodbath. The Union had us outnumbered. There was no way I would survive, and for some reason, at that moment, I felt the need to preserve my life. I darted back into the woods and headed south. I didn't know where I was going, but I was not going to fight. On that day, the Confederates lost their first battle. Of the Confederate soldiers, 3,903 were killed. 18,735 were wounded, and 5,425 were missing or captured. I was on the run. I was one of those missing soldiers. I caught a train back to North Carolina and headed for the swamps. Men were being forced to be part of the army. I couldn't go home while the war was in full force. I hid in the swamps, lying low. It was a lonely 2 years of complete isolation. When Robert E. Lee surrendered, I was happy. I don't really know why, considering I fought for the Confederacy for so long, but I was ready to go home. I went home. It was miles away and I was tired, but I didn't care. I walked, I jumped trains, and I got home. Upon arriving, nobody recognized me. I didn't really think they would. I went to my father's home, and the house was deserted. I had the first real bath I've had in months, and put on one of my old dresses. Around back, I saw some of the help. He was new, obviously, and didn't recognize me, but he knew my father and told me where I could meet my family. Being reunited with my family was indescribable. I cried for the first time in years. Things were different. The war changed me those 4 years, wounded me emotionally beyond repair. At the young age of 24, I was thrown back into a life so familiar, but so distant. With time, I adjusted. I still had nightmares, and after over 50 years, I still have nightmares, and can remember the darkest part of that war. But with hardships comes learning and wisdom, and without those experiences, I would have never been able to share with my children, and now my grandchildren, how I learned to be brave and make the right choices in the face of death.